Good morning, grade 10 science. Today's lesson is on biodiversity. We have a quote here from Edward Wilson that says, "Biodiversity is the planet's most valuable resource, and it is on loan to us from our children." So what is biodiversity? Well, the word is actually made up of two words, biological, from bio, which means living things, and diversity, which talks about a great variety of living things. So biodiversity tells us how much variety we have of species in a system. It also talks about the variety we have of ecosystems, the variety we have even of genetics within a species. If we can understand biodiversity, we can understand why species that are affected by changes occur on the Earth and which species are most at risk. Biodiversity isn't the same everywhere on Earth. Some areas have high diversity. You will find a great variety in living things. Some areas have low diversity. There is very little variety amongst living things. In general, tropical regions, areas that are warm and wet near the equator, have very high biodiversity, and areas that are polar, that are quite cold, have lower biodiversity. Also, if we have more rainfall, we can support more living things and therefore have a higher biodiversity than an arid, which also means dry environment like a desert, which has very low biodiversity. So areas like a tropical rainforest that is both warm and has lots of rain, or a coral reef that occurs in a warm environment and has lots of access to water, will have some of the highest biodiversity on the planet. So what kind of things would limit biodiversity then? Well, any kind of extreme conditions makes it hard to have a variety of living things. When it's very hot or very cold, very dry or very acidic, only a few species can handle such environments. Very high levels of nutrients also can limit biodiversity because it might benefit a few but would harm the majority. Remember our discussion in the last video about eutrophication? Even though the high amount of nutrients in the waterways supported the algae, overall it hurt the entire community. How does biodiversity affect an ecosystem? Well, in general, the more biodiversity, the better. It makes communities stable. A stable community is one that, even if an environmental problem hits or a tragedy happens and a bunch of animals are killed or lost, if we give it some time, it will come back to its original position. That's stable. If an environment hits a loss or some species are lost or killed off and it cannot recover, that would be unstable. The more biodiversity we have, the more likely a community will be able to handle an adversary. Take a look at these two food webs. The first one is a very complex marine food web in a saltwater environment. You'll see lots of species and lots of biodiversity. The other one is another environment up in the Arctic and has a much simpler food web. It has a much smaller biodiversity. If we were to remove just one species, I'm not even talking a keystone species like the krill that form the basis for the entire food chain. But for example, if you were just to cut out the small fish, look at how many lines on the food chain get broken. The complex marine ecosystem has many food chains available to it. And so while some damage would be caused by the loss of fish, overall the food chain, the majority of species would survive. However, in the Arctic ecosystem, the loss of those fish would have a tragic and devastating effect. In your workbook, we have tasks 8 and 9 available for you to complete. I'm not going to get you to do the article research and writing up a synopsis right now. We're just going to answer the 4 questions on task 8, I believe, and that will be it for this lesson.